Boosie has been fighting demons for years, but this time, it looks like everything is crashing down. The feds just hit him with a heavy federal gun case that could land him behind bars for 10 years. And just when the news broke, who do you think popped up? None other than Charleston White, hip-hop's loudest troll, celebrating like it was his birthday. But here's the real question. Is Charleston just clowning, or does he know something we don't? He walked into that courtroom with a grin, cracking jokes, even boasting that he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Cold, maybe even ruthless, but that's Charleston for you. Some folks live for the chaos, and for him, this was like the Super Bowl. But here's where the story takes a turn. Earlier this year, Boosie had already told his fans he was tired of fighting the system, even hinting that he might just take a plea deal to finally put the case behind him. The twist? This wasn't just a state case anymore. The feds swooped in, picked it up, and suddenly the whole thing was on a different level. Now, here's the shocking part. There was even a Supreme Court ruling that played in his favor, and for a moment, it looked like the nightmare was over. The judge dropped the case. Boosie himself said he was trusting God through it all. But you could see the toll it was taking. And let's not forget, this wasn't the first time. That same gun charge had already been tossed out once, back in 2023. Back then, everyone thought Boosie was finally free to focus on his music, his family, and just living life without looking over his shoulder. But the feds weren't done. By 2024, they circled back, dusted off the same charge, and indicted him all over again. This time, the pressure finally broke him. Boosie admitted he was done burning energy in courtrooms and battles he couldn't win. On X, he shared a message that hit different. God don't make mistakes. It wasn't just another post, it felt like every word carried the weight of a man who had reached his breaking point. In that moment, you could sense the exhaustion. He wasn't the same fiery Boosie who used to clap back at trolls or throw jabs online. Instead, he sounded cautious. Trolls or throw jabs online. Instead, he sounded cautious, even defeated, like someone who realized the risks of losing everything were bigger than his pride. Fans who've been following him since his Baton Rouge come up know this isn't the first time he's faced storms. Court cases, street drama, even health scares. He's been dodging bullets, both literal and legal, for decades. But this time feels different. 10 years is no light sentence. It hit him hard like a ton of bricks. What we saw on social media wasn't the untouchable Boosie of old, but a man worn down, carrying the scars of every fight he's had to survive. For the first time, it looked like the fight in him was finally fading. Charleston White was online popping champagne like he had won the lotto, while fans showered him with love and prayers. He went live with a big smile on his face and declared that he had foreseen this years ago and was eager to celebrate Boosie's demise. Charleston then went too far by expressing his hope that Boosie would never return home, as if that weren't enough. Even by Charleston standards, that's crazy. But it's precisely his wildness that makes his name so popular. No, I don't really have any opinions about them because, I may wind up in jail for having them. This means that I don't really have any opinion about them, Once you start threatening people and kids who are talking about you, you know that I'm not the one who'll do it. I will not do any of that. Do you understand what I mean? There are certain people you simply can't really say what you think of, and he's one of them. You cannot express your feelings since doing so could land you in jail, and I am not being deceived. The fact that Charleston's feud with Boosie wasn't sudden is what makes this whole thing even more bizarre. Charleston always seemed to be lurking, waiting for Boosie to slip, and this had been simmering for years. In fact, their drama dates back to late 2022 when Kanye West's notorious White Lives Matter shirt rocked the culture. One of the first to voice their opinions was Boosie, who said, was disrespecting black folks. To be honest, the majority of people concurred with him. Oh, Charleston, however, he changed the course of events. He immediately took to the internet to attack Boosie for even mentioning Kanye. It was war after that. Charleston did more than just criticize Boosie. He went below everyone's expectations by involving T.I.'s son, King Harris, and Boosie's son, Tootie Raw, in the mess. He said they couldn't fight, called them ugly, and even said they would both wind up behind bars eventually. At that point, folks understood Charleston wasn't just another blustery clout seeker. In order to get closer, he would target family members and aim below the belt. You got two from those white people, boo. What little toy is going to do now? What little to, hey, listen. Look, Vlad TV, you said allowing these to play with your two mothers online. In an interview with Tony the Closer, Boosie explained that voicing his opinions too much could easily land him in jail, especially when someone involves children. The streets couldn't believe it, and everyone was waiting for Boosie to snap back as he always does, but surprisingly, he didn't. Vlad ain't Vlad post. Everyone going to jail except Boosie. Someone tags Vlad TV. I'm going to put you in jail. I'm waiting for the FBI to give me the correct number because I'm going to file a report on your mother and other people, and you gave the man your name. The promoter specifically mentioned your mother, little boy, and he put you in jail, accusing you of being involved. You'll be on your knees, but your knees will be bleeding again." He maintained his composure by declaring that he was not going to allow Charleston to trick him into saying or doing something risky. That alone revealed a different side of Boosie, one that was cautious rather than afraid, knowing that Charleston wanted him to blow up but refusing to give him the satisfaction. Nevertheless, anyone observing could sense the tension simmering beneath the surface. "I feel, I trust in God, man." Charleston, being Charleston, didn't just take the insult and move on. By early 2023, things had really heated up. Charleston was already making fun of T.I. Heavy for his alleged paperwork party, and that's when Boo's son Tootie decided he had had enough. Tootie clapped back, calling Charleston old and messy and even telling him to go die. "I hope your daddy died from that diabetes," he said live, turning it up to the next level. That was more than just trolling, it was sheer venom directed at Boosie through his own child. In a turn of events that made matters worse, Tootie was actually arrested later that same month on a gun charge. "I hope forget to send him insulin 1 month. Who even says things like that?" Charleston took credit for it online as soon as the news broke, boasting that he had called the police, sent in pictures, and alerted the Department of Public Safety. "I'm not a street kid, I'm not a criminal, I'm a kid who was raised to tell the truth," my mother said when she entered the room. "I didn't do that, Mama. I had 2 lawyers, Carl Mallory and Louis Stearns, who later became Judge Stearns. However, I had 2 lawyers, and my mom is a well-to-do woman. I'm just playing." "Well, I'm not playing. I'm a teenager, going through a phase of rebellion. I'm not a street kid." He even accused Boosie of being a 6-time killer who used children to do his dirty work, wild accusations with no evidence, but Charleston said it loud enough for it to stick, and their feud officially moved from online jokes to real-life repercussions. "Hell yeah, I'm gonna tell on you. I've been telling since I was a little bitty boy." When you thought things couldn't get any messier, 2023 rolled around with even more heat for Bowie. Not even 3 months after Charleston dragged his son, Bowie was picked up in San Diego, immediately following a court hearing. Charleston wasn't just talking trash, he was actively trying to ruin Boo's life and his son's. He pulled it off, put the hammer back on the gun, and then, as if the system had been waiting to grab him again, he shut it. Charleston quickly turned it into his own comedic act and went live on Instagram, preaching like a pastor and declaring that this was God's purpose. Using other people's hardships as a punchline, Charleston was able to turn Boosie's suffering into material for his fans. Some fans believed he was trolling, while others believed he was being serious when he compared Boosie to Daniel in the lion's den, as if prison was some sort of divine punishment. This was disrespect on a whole new level. You could see the frustration boiling in that interview when Boosie finally broke his silence on Vlad TV in the summer, when the trolling had become so intense that he couldn't keep it up any longer. Boosie openly stated that he didn't even want Vlad to interview Charleston, especially after what he had said about Tootie, but he again made an effort to clarify that he wasn't afraid of Charleston. He was trying to stay free, which has been his primary goal since day one. Don't let anyone trick him into saying something that might put him in jail even longer. Despite cool exterior, it was clear that Charleston was living raunchy in his head, because he was always the first to flip the story and run his mouth whenever Boo's name made the news. Then, in early 2024, the feud erupted in the most outrageous way possible on the internet. One of the most popular streamers, Aiden Ross, had intended to invite Boosie to join his stream, which should have been enormous Boosie on Twitch, with all those eyes watching, but this is where Charleston's name reappeared. Bowie chose not to do it because he didn't want to be associated with Charleston's nonsense. The next thing you know, Aiden changes the story and goes on the internet to say that he rejected Boosie because he was loyal to Charleston White. This falsehood quickly went viral on social media, with people making fun of Boosie as though he had been cheated on by a streamer when, in reality, he was merely attempting to stay out of Charleston's shadow. DJ Vlad had to intervene because the situation had become so out of control. He attacked Aiden, claiming that it was absurd to support someone like Charleston, who had only applauded Hitler and rejected the Holocaust. Vlad's outburst demonstrated the true danger of Charleston's influence. Charleston was no longer just an internet troll. His reputation was so powerful that young streamers, rappers, and clout chasers were using him like a golden ticket, and even those who had nothing to do with Boosie were putting themselves in his way just to get clicks off his name. However, Charleston wasn't finished stirring things up. When he returned to the internet in March, he claimed that Boosie was warning promoters not to book him. Naturally, Charleston took promoters not to book him. Naturally, Charleston took that as an opportunity to launch another tirade, claiming that Bowie was threatening people and that he had already contacted the federal government. He boasted that he was prepared to have Boosie in prison once more, using the FBI as his personal bodyguards. He even brought up Boosie's health to further aggravate the situation, making derogatory remarks about his diabetes and acting as though it were a punchline. That's Charleston style: hit below the belt, make it as personal as you can, and keep the focus on him. This wasn't just noise either. Imagine sitting at home already dealing with an impending federal sentence, and then guys in prison calling you up like they're saving you a bunk. Boosie acknowledged that he was receiving calls from people already behind bars, asking when he would join them. Charleston knew exactly what he was doing. People began speculating that perhaps Boosie didn't want to go through a full trial and just wanted it over with. And to be honest, can you blame him? Consider the possibility of Charleston appearing in court. It wasn't just trolling anymore. It was about applying pressure, making Boosie feel as though the walls were closing in before he even touched the cell. You already know that Charleston White would have made the entire situation into a circus if he had even had the opportunity to sit in that courtroom. He is the kind of person who will point fingers, make jokes about the jury, then go outside and run to the blogs and say things like, "I helped put Boosie away." That is exactly Charleston White's entire strategy. Another aspect of Charleston's story that keeps coming up is his boasting about calling police, setting people up, and even confessing to testifying when he was a teenager. At the age of 14, he participated in a robbery in which another teen shot a man named Michael Levy. Rather than remaining silent, Charleston testified in court against his co-defendant, Antoine Doolittle. Being called a snitch is the ultimate betrayal in street culture, and despite his youth, people never let him go on from it. However, Charleston doesn't back down from it. In fact, he defends it, saying, "I was young, I was in court, I was honest. Snitching is not what that is. That's how you survive." The internet erupted in accusations of hypocrisy when the old juvenile court tape was just rediscovered. People said, "How can you call rappers rats when you testified yourself?" Charleston redoubled, saying he didn't care who was upset about it and that he never lived by the street code anyhow. When you combine Boo's plea deal, his worn-out manner, the internet rumors, and Charleston's never-ending circus, it makes sense why Bowie simply wanted to skip the trial and accept the plea. That's the thing about Charleston: he's untouchable in his own way because he's not playing by the same rules as everyone else. He'll probably wave his own paperwork in the air while clowning you for being a rat, which keeps people watching even if they despise him for it. Bowie wasn't fleeing the law, rather, he was fleeing the chaos Charleston was prepared to bring into the courtroom, which is why this beef goes so far beyond simple trolling. It's messy, personal, and it's costing Boosie his peace of mind at the moment. The last thing he needed was to sit in a courtroom while Charleston turned it into a live performance. When word leaked out that Bowie was relying on that plea deal, Charleston White appeared online. To Boosie, this wasn't just another rapper caught slipping, it was karma, plain and simple. His entire world feels like it's hanging by a thread, and Charleston White is treating it like front-row entertainment. In Charleston's eyes, this was the last confirmation that he was correct all along, and he went live, boasting that everything he had been saying for years was finally happening. He pretended that the streets had just given him a trophy for being correct all along, which is why the celebrations in Charleston were so intense. It's clear that this feud is no longer about influence, it's personal. Boosie hadn't even processed his own reality when Charleston danced on his downfall like it was a party. He even openly stated that he had been praying for Boosie to go back to jail at this precise moment. Charleston has been obsessed with Bowie since 2022, and whenever something went wrong, he would come up to make things worse. He would make fun of Tootie's arrest, make fun of Boosie's health, and call the federal government whenever he could. It seems like he won't be content until Boosie is gone from the picture, but here's the thing, there are differing opinions on this one. Some claim that Bowie caused it himself, claiming that after years of evading prosecution, insulting people online, and leading a careless life, it was just a matter of time before the federal government put him in a box. The fans who ride with Boosie heavy, however, see Charleston as a survivor, a man who has been through hell and back and has continued to push, and to them, he appears less like a truth teller and more like a hater who is obsessed with tearing down another black man. To them, Charleston is simply stating what others have been thinking aloud. Indeed, if Charleston is this loud while Bowie is still technically free, just think of the circus if the judge actually imposes a 10-year sentence on him. Charleston will treat that as his own personal victory parade. That is the debate that is currently raging in barbershops, podcasts, and comment sections everywhere. Charleston thrives on other people's suffering. The more people react, the more energy he gets, and cycle just keeps feeding itself. He will be on every platform imaginable, live streaming, shouting, and possibly even popping bottles. That's how far he's willing to go to rub it in. And it's not unrealistic to assume he'll keep going deeper. It's nearly impossible. Assume he'll keep going deeper. It's nearly impossible to find peace when you have Charleston in your ear, the feds breathing down your neck, and the internet divided between mocking you and praying for you. Boosie is attempting to rely on faith, but his words reveal a man who is exhausted. His posts about trusting God don't sound like the typical arrogant Boosie fans grew up watching, but rather like someone bracing for the worst. To put it simply, this is one of the most outrageous feuds in hip-hop at the moment because it is based on humiliation rather than records, street corners, or even money. It is not just about jail time, it is about a legacy being tested regarding whether Boosie can recover or whether Charleston's voice will be the one reverberating over his career forever. Charleston White reverberating over his career forever. Charleston White made it his goal to publicly humiliate Boosie at every turn, and now that he could spend 10 years in prison, he is acting like the internet's king. The catch is that if Boosie does end up in prison, it could backfire because every time the system takes a rapper down, there's always a chance they come back stronger. However, for now, it's a waiting game, with Boosie's plea deal on the table, the streets bustling, and Charleston circling. The streets bustling, and Charleston circling like a vulture, waiting to feast on whatever's left of his reputation. Prison has been a strange reset button for many artists, and if Boosie returns home after 10 years, stronger and sharper, the Charleston celebration might not age well. No matter which side people take, one thing is certain, the spotlight is hotter than ever, and the outcome is set to rock the culture for years to come. This isn't just another headline, it's the kind of story that puts loyalty to the test, reveals fake friends, and reveals who is actually rooting for your downfall. The world is watching. So the only question that remains is whether Boosie will rise again or Charleston White will get the last laugh. Remember to subscribe, share, like, and comment to stay up to date on more crazy stories like this one.